Okay, well, thank you guys for coming. And for those people who have logged online, I really appreciate you coming to share this book launch. And what I'm going to do is go through a presentation today, and then we can have question and answer. And we have Rhett, who is online, to field any questions people have online as well. So I want to start with envisioning our future and looking at what are we looking for in sustainability. And let's just have people online put in the chat box ideas that they might have for sustainability. What kind of future do we actually want? And so people here in the audience, pop up your ideas now. What are you thinking? Let's just share those.
Are we allowed just
Just pop them out.
Well, more whole human education and relationality and, agentic relationships in education. There's your word.
All right.
A deep connection
with each other and with the world.
School and the world, nothing left out.
Lovely. Thank you.
There you go.
Ali, Montana, anyone?
I probably said everything.
Catherine.
We come from the same cloth.
Yeah. Come on, you guys. Just what do you think of when you say, what is the sustainable world you want? What does it look like for your grandchildren or your children or your friends and neighbors?
I think ways to work more effectively and cooperatively across differences and divisions.
Nice.
That's a huge one.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. Reconciling our differences. Yes?
I think about connecting with the nature and the environment.
Lovely. Creating those connections and strengthening them. Thank you.
And I think there's something as well about being able to navigate the many changes that are coming. As we're in this climate changing world, being able to navigate that as whole people who are a part of the Earth systems that we live within, rather than separate from.
Nice. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to just hive off on that and say something else to Ali that reminds me. It's it's the Donna Haraway thinking of being able to sit with uncertainty. I was just with a student on the phone. We were talking about the ability to pay attention, to know, but to not know. So we equip ourselves to be able to sit in those kind of middle places until something comes, not rush in with a new plan, because often that's inadvertently the old plan with just a new name.
Yes, exactly.
So there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and how do we prepare ourselves for being able to sit with and listen for what's coming, and look at the patterns that exist that can help us.
The patterns that connect.
Throw that. Sorry, I don't.
Anyone else? Okay, I really appreciate those thoughts and comments because we really need to have a vision of the future. As our words of wisdom from Albert Einstein, our problems we face cannot be solved with the same mindset we used when we created them. And David Orr, in 1992, he stated that the environmental crisis is first and foremost a crisis of the mind, perception, and values, and hence a challenge to those institutions presuming to shape minds, perceptions, and values. It is an educational challenge. And so envisioning our future, the very beginning of the book, I've noted that if we are to develop a sustainable society, we need a clear vision of a sustainable educational system that can release us from the unsustainable mindset and practices of the industrial schooling system. In essence, if we are not guided by a conscious vision of the future we want to see, we will be guided by our unconscious acceptance of the present we already have. And so I came together with this book. I've been working in the field of education, outdoor environmental education, and then sustainability education right from the 1970s. And I see so many colleagues working really hard to make a difference in education, often to be subverted and burnt out. And so I asked, why are we not getting anywhere? What is stopping this from going forward? And so this has culminated in this book, which is a combination of my master's and my PhD, and then research from our students in the Master's in Environmental Education and Communication, students at Cape Breton University who are doing a curriculum design course with me in sustainability, innovation, and creativity. And so it's a culmination of a lot of people's work and resources, and I'm just really honored to be able to put it together and share it with people. And the structure of the book is based on backcasting. John Robinson brought it to me in one of his articles, and The Natural Step in 2011 put together this diagram. So we start with visioning. We need to know where we're going to start with, rather than starting with the problems we face today. So we start with a vision, with awareness in defining our success, and then we backcast to the baseline. And so the book starts with a vision of sustainability and education for sustainability, pulling together the authors who have been doing seminal work in this area for many years, and the United Nations and the work that's going on internationally. So from that vision, we backcast to the present state, and I'm going to bring that forward to you in this presentation, looking at what are the major roadblocks which have been stopping us getting to where we want to go. Teachers have been working very hard for so many years, but there hasn't been much change. And then the book in part 2, 3 looks at creative solutions based on ecological thinking, an ecocentric paradigm. And then the final part of the book is about deciding on priorities, our next steps. And there's lots of excellent work that students have been doing, and many educators at all levels have been doing that we can learn from. And so I'm hoping this book will not only take you from the vision to today, but really inspire and give real examples of what we can and are doing in moving forward. So I first want to look at this baseline, this dominant Western framework we have. It's a mechanistic paradigm, and we're becoming more and more familiar with that. Descartes, in the 17th century, consciously separated our brain, our mind, and environment in relationship, and focused on the dominant left brain as a deductive logical reasoning. It separated this idea that the creative right dominated aspects of ourselves, the creative intuitive is separate from logical deductive reasoning. But in truth, they are, in fact, bridged, and we need both in order to function, and we consciously and subconsciously use both. So our dominant paradigm needs to shift as well to actually recognize that. But our educational system is still very much focused on the dominant left brain thinking. If you think about it in school, and if you are taking art classes as compared to someone who's taking science classes, which is considered more valuable? And mechanistic thinking has separated or given us a sense that the economy, the environment, and society are separate, and it has functioned as if they're separate, with the economy being the dominant sphere. I'm going to go fairly quickly through this, but feel free to ask more questions later, or as we go, feel free to ask a question. And learning has become fenced off from our environment and our community. I remember looking, just like that little boy, out the window so many times at the mountains, thinking, I want to be out there skiing. Thankfully, I had a mom who said, it's your responsibility, off you go. But more and more, we're starting to take kids out of the classroom. But it is an effort, often. We have a lot of blocks in the way from administration and leadership that say all these liabilities, and you need these permission forms. And I even heard one school district very recently has said you have to email every parent before you take them out, every time you take them out, which makes it almost impossible to take a group of 20 to 30 kids outside when suddenly the weather gets better. And the dominant paradigm is also focused on reductionism and thinking the world to pieces, which is a phrase from Noel McInnes. And we focused on the bits and the parts and the pieces. And so knowledge as well has been broken down into all those different subject matters. And the higher you go in education, the more and more refined it becomes. So math gets split up into calculus and geometry and et cetera, science, chemistry, physics, math, and then it goes higher and more refined the higher you go on the system. And it's the same for all. Social studies, we've got law, history, geography, language arts, it's the same thing. So all of these different areas are all considered separate. And if you try to combine them in the school system, you get a lot of pushback. I was teaching a Science 10 course, and it was climate change, and so I was automatically bringing in social considerations. And I had a parent complaining because they were having a provincial exam in Science 10, and they thought their child was not going to succeed if I brought any social studies into science. Thankfully, we had a principal who said those kids are going to know more. And it's also focused on individualism. So Newton described the universe as a billiard ball universe, where things do not have relation to each other unless they collide. And so we have this sense of being individual and being autonomous people, not necessarily connected to the people around us. Even in an elevator, we tend to stay quite separate because we don't have that sense of connection as strongly as previous paradigms might have encouraged. And this individualism, you can recognize it's an American picture of a school system. Thankfully, not many of these exist. Most schools now are bringing in tables and group work, but we still see it in exams. And don't you dare copy from anyone. You must do your own work. And there's also linear thinking as a major concept in our dominant paradigm, where the educational system is designed to put together all the basic building blocks sequentially, like you must add, then you subtract, then you multiply, then you divide. You can never start with division or multiplication. You can never start with three-dimensional math before you get to two-dimensional math. So it's very lockstep based on this linear thinking of the bits and parts and pieces. I often think of it as giving a child a jigsaw puzzle without the picture. And they just see all these bits and parts and pieces, and somewhere along the line, they're supposed to understand the whole. And we often have students in grade 9 when they get to their math, and they say, why on earth do I have to know this? You say, well, you might need it later. And this linear thinking is dominant in society with this take, make, dispose way of manufacturing with pollution all along the way. And the school system, it is designed as a linear system where you're age grouped and you go to grade 1 and then grade 2 and grade 3. When I was younger, you had to pass grade 1 before you could go to grade 2. And if you failed grade 1, you're in summer school until you're allowed to go into grade 2. Many systems around the world are still like that. And you don't ever have 9-year-olds working with 6-year-olds or 7-year-olds unless it's a special program. Usually it's age grouped and it's very linear. And as you go through that conveyor belt of formal education, people fall off as they go. Some drop out grade 6, others drop out when they're 16, others leave the system at 18 and go into the work world.
And lots of people hide away.
And lots of people hide away because they may not have learned to read, and they hide and they just keep trying because that conveyor belt keeps going. And then when we get to, some go into university, some go into formal, and I think the irony of my PhD going to the top of that linear conveyor belt was to say this system is a problem. And it's also based on top-down control throughout our society and definitely in education. This came out of my PhD research where the case study school I was working with showed this very strongly. So we had the Ministry of Education tends to dictate to school boards the curriculum and how to go about doing things with their budgets. That gets put down to the superintendent in the maintenance department, superintendent to the principal. There's a parent advisory council often with a bit of interchange. And then the principal influences the teachers. And interestingly enough, in the middle of my PhD research, there was a teacher strike, which suddenly stopped all the development. They were trying to model and teach sustainability, and now it was extracurricular. They couldn't touch it. So the teachers' union is very powerful in influencing whether these innovative programs could happen. And at the very bottom is the student. And it's also competitive, based on survival of the fittest. To ensure a fair selection, you all get the same test. You must all climb that tree. And there's been, as a result, a real decline in divergent thinking, which is the essence of innovation and creativity. This study by Landon Jarman in 1992 took, I think, 250 aged 3 to 5 students, and 98% of them showed divergent thinking. The same children, aged 8 to 10, which would have been after they entered the school system, only 32% still showed divergent thinking. At age 13 to 15, now only 10% of them showed divergent thinking. And then they didn't have the same students. Instead, they took 250,000 age 25 people, and only 2% showed divergent thinking. So I think we've got a real problem when we need to innovate in designing and transforming into a sustainable society. We need innovation and creativity. So it is an educational challenge. And the messages we're giving people in education and in society are doom and gloom because of the issues around us, which are a result of that mechanistic industrial paradigm. So we've got hurricanes, we've got climate change, we've got sea levels rising, and that totally disempowers people, and it is not helping us get anywhere. And we're also told to tread lightly, leave no trace. And that's thinking that humans are separate from the environment, and humans are bad for the environment. And then we're told to tiptoe, and we're often made to feel guilty. Kids have a real hard time if you tell them to tiptoe and feel guilty. We're told to turn out the lights and cycle to school. And when I've had sessions with students who have had a climate change presentation, and the outcome, we're popping ahead, and the outcome was turn out the lights, cycle to school, they said, I don't see how that's going to stop sea levels from rising. So there's a real disconnect in people's minds in what their personal efficacy is. So is this the best we can do? That's my grandson, Phineas. And that next generation is really wondering. And this is from McDonough Brongart's Cradle to Cradle, Remaking the Way We Make Things. Being less bad. As long as humans are regarded as bad, 0 is a good goal. But to be less bad is to accept things as they are, to believe that poorly designed, dishonorable, destructible systems are the best humans can do. This is the ultimate failure of the be less bad approach. It's a failure of imagination. So what about an entirely different model? What would it mean to be 100% good? So kids and adults can live carefree as part of the earth, not have to tiptoe. So we need to inspire hope, and education is absolutely key. So creative solutions is that next step in the backcasting process, and that's where we go in the book. Looking at principles of sustainable living systems. How do sustainable living systems maintain their resilience? How have they been able to be as creative and innovative as conditions around them change? So the book is built on the ecological principles. And it uses nature as our model, our mentor, and measure, which is a quote from Janine Benyus, who started the Biomimicry Institute. So we use ecological principles to redesign administration, buildings, grounds, and resources, curriculum, teaching, and learning. We have to address the whole system. And so I'm going to go through each of these. It doesn't come as clearly, but we've got interdependence, community, diversity, cycling, energy flows, feedback, adaptation, emergence, and the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So if we use these ecological principles, what would education look like? What does our educational system look like? What does our administration look like? What do our buildings and grounds look like? What does our curriculum look like? And our teaching and learning. And that's the essence of the book. So interdependence. In natural, resilient living systems, everything is interdependent. And it involves systems thinking. So our environment, society, and economy are not separate. They are totally interdependent and integrated. each one influencing the other. Communities also build resilience. So natural systems work in community rather than individualism. And diversity equals strength. The more diverse, the stronger we are. And cycles. In nature, waste equals food. So all these blossoms, from McDonough and Brongart's example, fall, and then you think, oh, what a waste. But they come into the ground and they generate the nutrients for the next year. What if we use that same principle in education? Feedback loops also monitor the health of systems. What if we put the tailpipe on the inside? That'd be a powerful feedback mechanism. Cut pollution, overpopulation with the all-green eco-car. We'd quickly redesign how we made vehicles if we had those feedback loops.
Or die.
And our educational system, rather than that top-down, we could incorporate feedback loops. So students are interacting with their parents and teachers and the administration and community members, maintenance departments, and unions. There was another one of my case study schools who were in Earth Week putting on a video presentation of the work they did, and the maintenance department decided to spray for carpenter ants at the same time and was gassing everybody out, and someone else was using a blower and they couldn't hear things. So we need to be integrating with all these different aspects of our system. They're all important, but we need to have these feedback loops so we're working together, and students are not at the bottom in a one-way model. And adaptation across scales in a system is key to how to build in resilience. So we have the larger systems, such as the Ministry of Education, and then we have school districts, and we have schools. We also can add other levels, so we've got the students in there, and we've got the larger environment, what's happening around us. So we have these nested cycles at various scales that are always adapting and interacting. So the large system remembers, it's slower, and it tends to stabilize. But innovation happens from the smaller, faster loops. So schools and students and teachers can innovate, and that can cause revolt up the system. Or you could have school districts at the middle level innovating, which can innovate and cause revolt up to the larger system and down to the smaller systems. We're seeing it in nature right now with climate change changing. So that is affecting our countrywide systems, our district systems, and our personal lives with extreme weather events. So we can model this system to our benefit so that there's feedback and interaction, and we're seeing ourselves in a constant dance of adaptation. This is really key for administration and management. How we administer and manage needs to be part of this panarchy, as Gunnarsson and Halling have labeled it.
Imagine if on your CV, when you went to apply for a school administration job, you said, I know how to fractal.
Yes.
I know how to adapt and, collapse to things.
And I know how to collaborate.
And reorganize. And
Exactly.
levels.
I know how to adapt and emerge.
Fractal became like a competence,
Wonderful.
right? I think revolt might not get you the job.
We would call it, instead of revolt, which is the language of Gunnarsson and Halling, we would call it innovation,
Right, or reorganization.
reorganization.
The new levels of maturation and identity.
Exactly.
Yeah, beautiful.
And innovation empowerment then comes from all levels, from our seniors interacting with our youth, from us interacting with our natural world, from youth organizing their own conferences, and this is at the United Nations level, junior boards. They're running tons of conferences. As my younger daughter Annie, when she was 11, running to be North America's representative at the United Nations children's conferences. So it's amazing the innovation that youth have if we enable it and empower it. We learn so much. We've got youth in Nepal coming up with water systems because they have to walk a kilometer. And they said, well, I don't need to do that if I innovate. And someone else put in a solar hot water system just with the recycled materials that were in their community in India. So around the world, youth are innovating. And we can learn a lot if we work together. because it's often the seniors in our society who have the leverages of power and can open doors. So working and collaborating,
They know how to tinker,
they do.
right? They know old ways.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Some of those good ways.
And I love this bottom picture because the senior person is really thinking about what this youth is talking about. And they're working together because we have wisdom in our elders. And we need that wisdom, we need that slower knowledge to be brought forward. And so in nature evolves solutions rather than planning and imposing from the top down. As conditions change, nature adapts, evolves, and emerges. So how do we do that in schools and in our whole educational system? So I wanted to just pop in here. So we're talking, a lot of these other slides are about the organization and management in schools and in education, but also within someone's teaching. And then when we come down to curriculum, we have to really rethink curriculum, being planned and imposed from the top down, one size fits all. And this is a design I came up with when I started the Green School. I had the whole school sorted, organized legally, and then I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do Monday morning? Because I had this theory, but I was going to be faced with the kids, and I thought, how do I put this in action? So I developed this curriculum design model, which is based on the ecological principles running through the core of the curriculum, which is something Stephen Mater inspired me with back in the late 70s and early 80s. And so that's been with me ever since. And I thought, well, if you start with topic-based learning to begin with, and then you recognize the various aspects we're totally integrated with, the elements, the plants, the animals, and people, that includes reptiles and birds and all of that. And you look at how it changes over time. It didn't come out in this slide, but that oval through the center is change over time. And then the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Are the ecological principles woven into how we're actually designing curriculum? And because we have these different topics, we have to look at how these different lenses can help us understand those topics. So we've got social studies and science, language arts, math, music, art, and PE. And I see social studies and science as the core of where these topics tend to come from. And math, language arts, music, PE, art are all ways of expressing, and they're languages for us to share. And so you would take a topic, it could be anything, it could be energy, and you look at the elements, or it could be climate change. The elements, the plants, the animals, the people, and what I do is with the students, they create the unit with me. I don't create it separately. And so they're brainstorming their ideas and how this all starts to generate thoughts and ideas of their learning. And from there, with my knowledge as an educator about language arts, social studies, art, PE, music, I'll help weave in ways for them to explore that learning. So it becomes very holistic.
I almost want it to move in the
It spins through time.
spirograph.
Exactly.
Remember the
So it's,
spirograph?
that's right.
You could actually make like sacred geometry art.
And when I drew this, it kind of just came to life, and I thought, oh, it's kind of like the Earth spinning through space.
Yeah.
So that's explored a lot more in the book of how we design that curriculum and people who have worked with it and what it looks like. And it's also based on inquiry learning with the active learning cycle. So this is from Kolb's The Active Learning Cycle of direct experience. So we're connecting with our natural environment, we're using experiential inquiry-based learning, and then critical reflection, and then abstract conceptualization, and then experimentation, and then again, from that, more direct experience. But I've used an inspiration from Hillary, using new R's. So we're reconnecting. We have reciprocity between the natural environment and our thinking. We're rethinking things, we're reconciling, and we're reimagining. So there's reciprocity all through this. We have regenerative and redesigning, and we're re-story-ating. We're creating a new story, a new paradigm, a new way of learning. And it's all based on inquiry. So it's student-focused rather than being told in a very didactic way what to think and how to think. When kids come into school, they've been brilliant learners. This is how students learn. That's how, children learn before they come into school. And then when they get to school, and I've been a formal education teacher through my years, started in grade 2, but when they come in, they say, right, now we're going to tell you what to learn, when to learn, how to learn, and then we're even going to tell you if you've learned. There's nothing left for the student to have an active voice in. Curiosity, it's fine from grade 1 to 3 because we have a sort of a pretend corner over there, but it's in the corner when you've got some extra time. And when you transition from kindergarten to grade 1, it makes a real shift. And a lot of students have a real hard time shifting from grade 3 to grade 4 because then it becomes even more dominated by that dominant paradigm, more abstract. So it's great to see. We've got a lot of educators really trying to embrace this and doing great work around it, but they're in a system that doesn't support it. So we need to look a lot further and look at this whole system change and collaborate together. Not just expect the teachers are going to do it all because they're so limited with what this system allows them to do. So the responsibility for the integrity and health of the whole is where the individual comes in. It's in collaboration and all of us working together. So what are your next steps? Seize the day. You never change by fighting against the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the old model obsolete. By Buckminster Fuller. And the world will thank you.
Liza, I was thinking about Andrew.
Yeah.
When you were doing that slide about the schools and the top-down. Remember, Allie, when we were there, and he used Makerspace to reimagine?
Do you want to use the microphone here, Hillary?
Yeah, sorry. He was using Makerspace to reimagine Royal Oak Middle School in a regenerative design using biomimicry. What if a school was a tree? And the students, the very last thing they said that day, I remembered it so clearly, they said, this one young guy, he just said, this was so empowering. He said, I just couldn't believe that actually you took my opinion and you might use it. And the superintendent was like jumping all around because he said, this is what we've been talking about. We just didn't know how to
bring
make
it
it happen. And the students were so thrilled to be part of that and was using art and, creativity and reflection, but they walked the grounds too because it was real. So, and he's in your book.
He's in my book. I was just looking through.
But I don't think it's that exact thing.
So
because
he
did it
started.
later.
Yeah, so he started with an idea, but what I love about what Andrew's done since is he's done it with the students. They've created it. It's been collaborative design.
Yeah. I think he's actually going to be hired to do this in other schools because they want this kind of thing
Wonderful.
to happen. So.
We also have Eric Meyer up in Creston, who has as his thesis done collaborative design of a garden, MRP, his design of his garden for his school using First Nations voices and all the diverse community voices.
He just passed.
It's so exciting. So it's coming in all those ways because that enables and gives space for the teachers to go outside.
But these are meek students, remember, because it does
They are.
come with learning and like an unlearning and learning, because lots of people come to graduate school and they think, oh no, what's it going to be? A gospel of despair, because they haven't had necessarily good school experiences. And then they find out this is what starts to happen. And then they, the sky's the limit.
Exactly. And so this is why in the book I really wanted to focus on the creative solutions. So people are seeing it happening and how it can happen. And these are, as you say, graduate students who have been immersed in environmental education and communication. But when people see what's possible, they just need to start those conversations happening and collaboratively bring it together. And I love the key of involving the students. At the Green School, we had a eco-architect as one of the mums, and together we planned the school. And the students came up with a river running through it and trees, and it was all possible.
Is it on? Is it on? Yeah. Oh, it is. I'm wondering, I feel like when I am reading about and trying to engage with ideas around, I guess, sustainable education, so much of what I see is like anchored in school education for children. And I wonder about, like, how does this translate, or like, yeah, like what are some of the ways maybe that you have potentially visioned this existing in more like adult education spaces or like non-formal education spaces?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. It definitely, I think it does apply. If you look at the ecological principles, you'll find a lot of them are active in adult education, because a lot of adults would not sit through the kind of formal education structures that kids don't have much choice about. So they often work in community. There is flexibility. There is adaptation according to their diversity. But if we look at that interdependence, community, diversity, we look at energy flows, feedback loops. We want feedback all the time. We need to be working with adaptation and emergence and allowing them to be part of driving that and individualizing within their community what makes sense for them to enable their diversity and the ways they want to apply it. So adult education is non-formal education. It's a little easier to do it. April Kuramata is a past student who is First Nations, and she has written in the book, Japanese. She works with First Nations people, and she has used these principles in health education in a non-formal setting. So there's lots of opportunity to start generating ideas yourselves on how these ecological principles can be used to stimulate change. It's also really important that our teacher education programs embrace this, because we need teacher educators to understand a new paradigm and how they can bring it forward. And really crucially, we need people in educational administration and management to understand it, because they often hold the leverages of power that could block or enable change. Ken Robinson said they need...
Glenn Thielman is teaching in-service teachers.
That's
like, 'cause
right.
you guys taught this summer
Yeah.
using biomimicry as one of your foundational premises.
That's right.
To make something pedagogical.
Exactly.
And imagine that as pre-service teachers that get
That's
this
right.
kind of map. It's like a map to the universe,
That's
really.
right. And
Yeah.
so we need all these different aspects of the system to be working together for the whole. And it was Sir Ken Robinson who said we need the higher levels in education, the administration, to set the conditions for education to thrive and all those students. So they create the rich soil for education to flourish. Rather than imposing and controlling, they're setting the conditions for thriving. Yeah?
So in the 90s, when I was going to be a math teacher, I was at U of C doing their education program, and one thing that was really emphasized, which I wonder if it still is in teacher training, is Piaget's stages of development. And you were supposed to do your lessons
Yes.
according to those stages, and I wonder if that is kind of constraining. And is it still in use?
And it's interesting because these thinkers have got lots of very important insights for us, but they're also very much couched in that dominant paradigm as well. So it was very lockstep stages, and students don't always follow that. So if we open ourselves to diverse ways of learning, then I think we open it up. So it just enables it to be a little more powerful.
And I just had another comment. I'm just doing some work for a conservation society. And one of the things, the vision of this society is that people actually live in areas that are being conserved and they become stewards of it. And I was saying to the board, I was saying the model of conservation that we have is you protect an area and people are not allowed.
That's
because
right.
people are bad,
Yeah.
can't be trusted.
And they're not part of nature. So I love that model
yeah.
of living in nature to be part of it. There's communities in Toronto where they're doing the same thing, really bringing nature into the city to be part of their living space.
And can we steal that thing from you?
Yes, by all means, use my... Yeah,
I'll give you credit.
yeah, by all means.
I'll apply it to what I'm doing.
Yeah, I'd love you to.
And I think we have to start with relationship with the natural world. You started with it at the very beginning, and then reflective practice. I know people think that's just an activity that we do in our program, and it's just, oh, this place bonding or sight-sitting, or you're just sitting in nature. It's profoundly shape-shifting, world-changing. It's the groundwork.
It is.
And, so when you asked that question at the beginning, what's your vision? Well, my vision is we drive onto campus in our electric vehicles or whatever, hydrogen vehicles, and we see people sitting all over the forest and in the meadows, just,
Connecting.
connecting, so that when they make a design, they already have it in their imagination, their bones, their knowing of how things work, how the world works.
Exactly. So
Right.
I'm hoping, in the same way, my grandson and these generations who grow up with this different way of learning, they will say, why would you make it that way? That creates waste. It makes no sense whatsoever. We need to redesign, rethink what you people are proposing, because they will understand and live an ecocentric paradigm and understand these principles as core to their ways of thinking.
Because he's brought up with that. Plus, he has the best pajamas. He gets to win the award for the best pajamas.
Wonderful. I think he's watching. I thought of another example. Carry on. Anyone else have a question?
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I missed the beginning part, so you may have already covered this, and I'm really intrigued to learn a bit more about the front end. What would you identify as the top two roadblocks when you've been able to do this in schools or work with administrations? What is their initial reaction to what Hillary's talking about, to involving students at the core, to finding that place in their place and grounding there? And then, of course, the follow-on is, and what do you say back?
Right. I think one of the core pieces is administration. And they have concern, understandably and legitimately, over budget, but also over control. And they're not comfortable with setting the conditions as much as controlling the conditions. Page 90, is it, Hillary? Or Ali?
Yes, it is page 9.
We looked this up earlier. So in systems that are near equilibrium, stability is maintained, and through our dominant paradigm, we've been conditioned to think that stability is maintained through efficiency, control, constancy, and predictability. That tends to be how management works. And we're comfortable when something's efficient, we can control it, it's constant, and it's predictable. This is from Gunnarsson Holling's book, Panarchy. But far from equilibrium systems, which are natural living systems, and humans as natural living systems, our stability is actually maintained through unpredictability, change, adaptiveness, and persistence. And so we've got a lot of work to do to help us embrace change and adaptiveness. So I think those are kind of key. We've got this dominant paradigm which is governing people to think the more I can control and predict, then the more stable system I can create. So it's a matter of working in education with these different levels in our system, not just the teachers working with students.
Being pesky, persistent.
Persistence
people.
is very important,
Pesky
yeah.
persistence is a compliment here.
It is. And if we can help them see, that creates stability and resilience, because there is an unpredictable world. We know things will change, and if we're resilient that we can embrace change, then we're going to be far more stable. We're not going to be thrown curveballs.
It's bizarre, isn't it, to say that, to embrace change, we're more stable.
Yes.
Like it sounds like a paradox, and we say yes, because there's that quote by, I think it's Rudolph Barrow, who says something like, and I'm not gonna do this properly, but it's something like, when the old cultures are dying, it takes a few people to be insecure to create the new culture. And he doesn't mean insecure like nail biting. He meant insecure like willing to risk, willing to try a few things, willing to, say, okay, we're not even going to go where that was. We're going to
Thank
go
you.
over here. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we have had innovation in one of my case study schools. There were a government-run elementary school that wanted to model and teach sustainability. And their principal was completely on board and really enabled all this innovation. And he understood the paradigm shift that needed to take place. And 2 years in, they were being undermined by all these mechanistic root metaphors, unbeknownst to them. They were protecting their own boundaries. They had a sustainability coordinator who was in charge of sustainability, so it's her job, not mine. They were not consulting everyone. And then the maintenance department undermined them, as I mentioned before. And they had an external grant which dictated certain outcomes. And that is a mechanistic construct. And so it didn't enable innovation and creativity because it didn't fund it. So we need to have the policies and the budgets also in support of what we're doing. So and then it was very difficult to see, but the school board then just moved principals around every few years. So they moved that principal somewhere else. Someone else came in who didn't understand it, and the whole thing collapsed for that as well as these other reasons. So we need to look systemically at the whole picture and understand the importance of these different levels in our system to be part of the solution. And for them to see that this is to their benefit, that this really helps you become a more effective administrator. And so they see it as not something they're being forced into or guilted into, but a way they can be part of this great transition that we're underway. There's thinking about an administrative detail. There's a school district in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was visiting some people there recently, and a non-formal educator at the museum was really working in a very wonderful way with their schools because the school had defined their school boundaries as a 2-kilometer limit, which embedded the community. So all these non-formal educators could work in collaboration with the school district, and the parents just signed one release form to be able to work within the school boundaries. And it was such a simple change, but it enabled so much.
Hey, Liza, how important is environmental communication, the ability to communicate these concepts?
It's essential. It's absolutely, the metaphors we use are absolutely essential. We need to speak as interdependence. We need to speak community. We need to speak adaptation and emergence. We need to use the language of ecocentric metaphors of networks, communities, adaptation, emergence, rather than the mechanistic metaphors of competition, survival of the fittest, war metaphors, adversarial dualisms. We need to change our language to support this because it's the metaphors we use which influence how we think, which influences how we act. Ali?
I have a question about that. There's a thing that I've been grappling with, which is that, I've gone through all these courses, and I love I love this thinking, and I am so steeped in this mechanistic worldview that I can be here and I can hear what you're saying, and it's like, yes, this makes so much sense, and I'm like so on board, but the communities that I spend time in, even with other MEEC students, we live and breathe this mechanistic worldview. And so, I guess I'm curious about, and maybe you answered this with the kind of that connecting with nature piece, but how do we kind of learn to embed this in ourselves? Because yes, when you're talking about we need to bring administrators and things like that on board, it's like they can know this, and that's different from then being able to live it out. And so I guess I'm just wondering about maybe what some of the different levels are of being able to actually bring that in so that, do you know what I'm saying?
I do know exactly.
This language makes sense to me, but I automatically speak the mechanistic language.
Yeah, good question. I find myself catching myself with mechanistic metaphors often. Not so much anymore, but it's been taking time and years to go, oh, wait a minute, that was mechanistic. And so changing our language takes time and real awareness around language. But we are in this mechanistic world. And so we can't beat ourselves up that we can't do something overnight because we are caught in a system. But what we can do is engage in community to try to initiate change. And it's these powerful examples of change which can spread. Could we bring up in the presentation slide 37? Is that possible? Is it possible to bring up slide 37 in the presentation? If not, it's okay. Can I do it here? Okay. Okay, I can do that here. That's magic, I can do it. Oh, that was it. Yeah. Welcome, Leslie. So we can have these small, fast innovations where we have a little more control. And at the municipal level, you have more control than you do at the federal or international level, obviously. So these small innovations can cause innovation and revolt up the scale. So we have to recognize we're in this panarchy, and we have influence, and we need to use that wherever we can, whether that's voting, whether that's bringing in school boards and trustees, having conversations with people, sharing a new way of learning, which is going to prepare our students at all levels to be the innovators as the transition is coming and is around us now. And we have this perfect moment in time where we've got the confluence of climate change and social issues, and we have a lot of financial issues. It's all coming together, and if we can look to nature and go, hey, that is a way forward, it's inspiring. Biomimicry is one of the most powerful ideas, and people look at it and they go, oh my gosh, nature has already invented this. We just have to often look to nature to see, and there's a website called asknature.org that Janine Van-Us has started with her colleagues, where you can put in any question and it'll tell you what the scientists have found as to how nature sequesters carbon. For example, our lungs do that. And we're doing a lot of innovating by looking to nature. So much hopefulness out there that we're not hearing, but we need to start sharing the hope in these areas. And often kids are locking into this. They've heard about all these things often because they're exciting and dynamic and they inspire hope.
Yeah, an antidote to doom and gloom.
Exactly.
But Liza, the important thing about coming out of the K cycle is the back loop.
That's right.
Is the dying off, so the ability to die off to old things, because it doesn't just fractal naturally, it fractals in a way that it doesn't take everything with it. Like, this is how we actually mature ourselves, mature the systems we work in. But that's really critical to know how to die. I know that sounds kind of doom and gloomy, but this is like getting to turn toward the rubble or the ruins and really say, what's here? Because there's regenerative aspects in the darkness. We can move forward.
Can I borrow that for just a second? And then come to you.
Vanessa, Andrea, she's like composting. Yeah, that's right.
So I didn't put on the slide deck an image of the adaptive cycle, which is explained more in the book. But as Hilary was talking about, we come to this state of conservation here. And it's a slow movement towards conservation where we develop more and more ties. And then this is a place where we tend to want to stay because it's stable and we're comfortable with it. But then you go through a renewal cycle. You let go, it's a release. And this is the back loop, Hilary, you're just mentioning. This is the back loop, which can feel uncomfortable because there isn't certainty. But that's where we can explore alternatives and opportunities. And I'd argue this is where we are as a society. And the school system is the old industrial model, is fighting here. And we're just at this cusp to just create a renewal, explore these ideas in the back loop, and bring forward new ways of doing it.
We're in all the phases.
We're all over. And so we can have these adaptive loops, and they're all adapting and emerging as conditions around change at all these levels. So it's an incredibly complex adaptive system we're in. But we know administrators are also innovating, and they're looking at new ways of managing. And if we use these ecological principles, they're very simple, and they really guide what can happen to direct that change across all levels. Sorry, I want to give it to you.
So I have a very simple example of that little loop there. Bob McDonald, CBC, he just did a series called Overheated, and they were talking about how 80% of land in municipalities is privately owned, right? And that homeowners have a great opportunity here to make a difference. And one of the things they were talking about was areas where people overheat. So waiting for a bus. So, just near my house, there's a bus stop up there. So they talked about, what about homeowners? Even, I know Saanich has a subsidy program, you plant a tree. If 80% of homeowners did that, right, that changes the landscape. It also creates good mental health to have trees around you. So that's just an example at that little tiny level of what is possible.
Yeah. And there's Pam Warhurst, I think. She started gardening in her community. They didn't ask for permission, they just started, and it's transformed the whole town in Ontario. And now big bus groups come through to see the community, and it's just this wonderful community of gardens. So a lot of innovation does happen and can happen, but we also need it to, it's not either or, grassroots or top down, it's everyone together organizing and seeing and being open to exploring that change. And there's going to be things that don't work, and that's okay, because it's all about adaptation and emergence and continuing to do that. I wanted to ask, Rhett, is there anyone online who has some questions?
Yeah, there's a couple in the chat here, and kind of one tying into, I think, what you're talking about right now. How can we backcast but also evolve solutions as we go? From Crystal Sandoval asked that.
That's great. It's yes and all of it. So yeah, so with that vision, the whole process of backcasting is just recognizing what we're working with the baseline so that we can evolve these creative solutions. But I think it's dynamic and it's going to have to keep going. So when you get those you just decide your next steps, then you can go, okay, is that getting us to our vision? Let's backcast to where that is and maybe evolve different. That's the active learning cycle happening, and that's this continual adaptation and emergence. It's how nature works constantly. I don't know if that answers it. It's just it's a continual dance of engaging with the process.
Thank you. I'm curious about the parents' responsibility, because I'm thinking parents' expectation about the outcome of the schools is different, and it might be based on the old system of education, and how they can help to speed up this achievement for sustainable education.
It's a great question, really great, because parents are crucial as part of this. And as I mentioned in that little example about science, they are wanting the best for their kids, and they're not comfortable with change if they see they went through this system, so they're not comfortable risking, in their quote. So it takes education that is focused with the parents, so everyone understands and is part of it. And that feedback has to continually happen between parents and schools and children. It's not just consult parents and then go do it, and the parents are going, oh, I hope it's going to work. When I started the Green School, I had a number of town hall meetings to try to get students to start a school, and that was the main concern of parents. What if we move? And I have to move my kids into the formal system. And as an educator, I could say, I know for sure that I can weave in the math, the science, the language arts that are needed for everyone to be successful in society. And I can make sure that they're ready if you're going to move to another system. But if anything, it's about that communication piece. So they feel comfortable. They're not just going to have those skill sets and insights or competencies or learning outcomes that the formal system dictates. It's about learning how to adapt and emerge and be creative and innovative so that they will actually be resilient in a society we're not even able to predict at this point. So when we have that conversation, with parents about the future and what they want for their kids, you're going to want your students, your children, to be adaptable, to be resilient, to be innovative and creative. And if they're going to be that, we have to do things differently. So it's a matter of having really important communication and keep parents in that circle with everyone. So they're part of the dynamic.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, Brett?
Yeah, another question in the chat here from Jason Bell. He's asking, what is divergent thinking? How is it eliminated by traditional education, and how can it be preserved?
Okay. So so divergent thinking is to be able to think sideways, to be able to think out of the box, to be able to be creative and come up with things that aren't expected. Students tend to do that often in schools, and teachers say, well, that's very interesting, but we don't have time for that, or we're not doing that. Yet a lot of programs are now bringing in what has been named Genius Hour, where for 1 hour in the week, they can do divergent creative thinking, and then they get back to the regular science and social studies. So there's a real powerful hidden curriculum which undermines what they're trying to do, and we have to be cognizant of that hidden curriculum. But to the question of divergent thinking, it's being able to think sideways, enable innovation and creativity. And the school system tends to limit divergent thinking because it has clearly defined learning objectives and learning outcomes. You're going to, and we're taught as teacher in our teacher training courses to write a lesson plan that says, here's my objective, here's my materials, here's my steps, here's how I'm going to evaluate, and everyone at the end of this lesson will be able to do X, Y, Z. So there's no room for divergent thinking. Teachers are trying to bring it in more now. We want to innovate with ideas like the Genius Hour and things like that. But we've got a reporting and evaluation system that is also trying to bring people into certain boxes that you can tick. So there's a great variety in educational systems, that some things will be more innovative or creative. Many others, particularly in the developing world, they've taken on board our traditional system and are very lockstep. I was working recently in West Bengal with teachers who face 100 students in their class, and they're expected to just parrot back the answers. So that kind of learning really is challenging, and the way to break that down is to break them into groups and to enable more topic-based conversations rather than this whole group didactic way of teaching.
So small, for sure, and knowing who your students are, but also outcomes that are heuristic. So they're more like a journey. Mm-hmm. And if you can't have that unless you know your students. And that's why there's still this great advocacy in many of us for smaller classes. Mm-hmm. It may not be, affordable in some ways, and yet it's essential if we're going to be really, truly educating in a meaningful way, because this is where things happen that can, absolutely be transformative. Because it's somebody on their way with their own natural powers and proclivities and passions, as Dewey said, mixed in with this beautiful world and all these topics and subjects, and then they come out the other side with something that's completely authentic to them.
That's right.
You don't have to memorize that.
No.
That becomes
And
your
you
way
can't.
of being.
Exactly.
But it's too tricky because we would like to pin things down.
That's right.
Well,
so
we do.
this is a challenge to teachers as well, because teachers feel they need control. A lot of teachers won't take their kids outside because they don't have four walls to contain them and they're afraid the kids will run off. So it's about inspiring students to learn, and they don't want to run off if they're doing something interesting and engaging, but it's a scary step for many educators to let go and allow learning to emerge. And so it's a step to embrace inquiry-based learning, where you're asking the question and you don't know the answer, but the question enables the learning to arise, and then as an educator you need to respond and help foster that learning and that exploration. bringing in these different languages of math and language and social art to see how you can use these different subjects to explore and further learning.
And mixing in arts-based outcomes.
Completely. Arts, music, language, body movement in the environment is all key to have holistic learning experiences. And those are much deeper, and they lead to far deeper insights with people. So they will be creative, and they're lasting, exactly. So we have, sorry, it popped out of my mind. Next question.
Yeah, there was earlier from Renee Senarini asking, is there a plan to distribute the book to public schools or directly to teachers?
Wow, I would love that. I'm constrained by my publisher, who has it for sale at Rutledge. It's an ebook, and unfortunately, the hard copy is an expensive hard copy. It's $150. It is online at the Royal Roads Library as an ebook, and we're going to ask them to have a hard copy. I'd love other universities and libraries, public libraries, to pick it up. I can only try to promote it, and I wish everyone who wants it asks their local library to buy a copy, so it can then be available to the public in their communities. Ask your school districts and have some conversations. I'd love to talk to anybody who wants to be involved here. Say, I'll come talk to your school district anytime, and I'll talk to your boards, your students, your parents. And a lot of innovation comes from parents. When parents coalesce around an idea, schools start listening. So there's lots of different avenues.
Homeschool networks would love a book like this.
That's nice. So how do we get it in there? That's a great question I'll explore. I did a lot of homeschooling with my children as well. So I think it's a powerful area as well. And a lot of school districts are supporting homeschooling students as well now.
So get it in through the back door.
Yeah, exactly. Where people... Did I answer that person's question well enough? Was
Yeah,
there...
I think so, yeah. And I just wanted to relay a comment here. It was from earlier. This is from Crystal Sandoval. She says, I find that many of my students walk in saying that people are the problem and the world would be better without us. I think it's such a powerful message to say that we are part of the answer as well. So,
Thank you. I think that is, and that's because we've had this separation of humans from nature, and we've tried to control nature, and we see nature as a resource. That's another really important note in our language. Instead, we are part of nature, and like other species, we use various resources in nature to survive, but we need to do it knowing we're part of that larger community. So seeing that, the students today really need to see the really exciting work that's going on out there. I'm going to give a plug to my daughter's site, Materium.org, Materiom.org, and she's working with her co-director, Liz, and they are creating, I'm not going to do it justice, Alicia, but they're creating a data platform where you can make materials from nature's building blocks, where everything is biodegradable, locally sourced, and that totally changes our materials. And when we see the exciting stuff that's going on with that and biomimicry, our youth today go, people are part of this solution, and we can innovate. We're really good at that. This was one of the phrases I was trying to think of. Janine Benyus said, we're a very young species. Humans are a very young species, still learning how to adapt. And it's a nice frame of reference for us to see ourselves as part of this larger picture, where adaptation and emergence is where we're at. And this, where students say, we're at a part of a big transition. So instead of climate change being doom and gloom, it's the opportunity for us to redesign as part of nature and really become a very effective, positive part of the larger community. Mike?
Building that, Liza, I'm just wondering, do you have any, I know writing a book is a big monumentous task, so you might not want to do this next question, but Any plans to create an open resource that's a toolkit for educators to take this book up into practice that can be shared? with your
Nice
Creative
idea.
Commons?
I have a website I haven't paid much attention to lately, which I have to really do and get that out there. And I want to use it as a network hub for educators who are using these ideas, and I can have a little more prominence for access for people to these ideas. So that's one way. And I'm always open to speaking to anyone who wants to have a little more insight and face-to-face communications or Zoom communications. It doesn't really matter. Yeah. Anyone else?
No, that's it for the questions in the chat.
All right. Woo! Thank you. Thank you guys very, very much. You've made it a wonderful opportunity for me.